this video, we're going to take a look at adding news feeds and news cards on your Thought Farmer internet. A specific type of content creation activity that happens quite often is one of the main use cases on Thought Farmer intranets. So in a previous video, we took a look at setting up group pages and policies. We did that by setting up a human resources group. What we're going to do now is add a news feed onto this group page. So again, clicking on the plus sign here on this group page is going to bring up my editor. I'm going to call this one HR Announcements. And I can add a description for this news feed if I want to, or I can just leave it blank and publish it to start adding posts. In the content type, I want to, of course, make sure to select that I'm setting up a news feed or a blog. Once I select that option, you're again going to see a set of very specific options show up that are related to this type of content. The display style is mainly what you want to focus on here. If you set up a news feed, there's 3 different options, and it's related to how the posts within that news feed are going to show up. You could have them show up as a list of news items with or without thumbnail images. We always encourage to use images as much as possible for any internet content, but especially news posts. So we encourage leaving this on. If you do need to set up a feed without images, you just uncheck that button. You can also have the article show up in a blog style. This means that the entire post will be shown one underneath the other on the newsfeed page itself, or you can choose a grid view, which just displays all of the news articles in sort of a card style view in a grid format. One last thing before I publish this news feed, you have the option to lock the main HR announcements page. By doing this, you're going to ensure that nobody with edit permission on your newsfeed will be able to make any changes to the main newsfeed, the one that we set up here. Things like changing the title of the newsfeed, moving it to another location. By locking this page, you avoid that sort of situation, but you still allow anybody with view and edit permission to add their own news posts. Okay. So one last thing before setting up a news feed is the thumbnail image. So if we select here the display style, a list view with displaying thumbnail images, a nice thing to do as you set up the main feed is to add a thumbnail image from here. That thumbnail image is then going to be the default image that will be used for any posts that are added here that don't have a specific thumbnail image attached. So I'm going to just select an image from my computer. And I'll add that in. Again, as we've seen in a previous video, it's nice to kind of go through all of the different views in which this image will be used and make sure that it is optimized for that specific view here. Click on done, and then I'm going to go ahead and publish my news feed, which is very empty right now. So I'm going to start by adding a new news post on this news feed, and I'll call it, maybe I'll want to create a post to welcome a new staff member. I'm going to create the title for my post, and then I'm going to grab some text and add that in the editor. From this area, I can of course add a nice image to my news post if I wanted to just share a photo of Neil, and I can do that by selecting the image button in the toolbar. I'm going to again look at my computer and add a photo of Neil. I'm going to insert it in the editor, and from there I can play around to optimize the image for that specific article. So in this case, I'm going to have it float right on my news article. You'll notice that as you add an image into your article, it's also going to automatically grab that image to be the thumbnail for this news post. I can see here that it may not be optimized to be used as a thumbnail in those specific dimensions of the thumbnail image, so I'm just going to click it and make sure that it looks a little bit better and highlights Neil. And lastly, the carousel image. There we go. I'm now going to go ahead and publish my first news article. You can see here, this is how the news article looks. If I go back to my HR announcements, you'll see that there is now one new article welcoming Neil Armstrong. I'm going to add one more news post to this HR announcements, and I just want to show how you can actually, instead of adding just a new post, you can also use news posts to add to existing content on the intranet. So I'm going to click on add here. Maybe I want to share a news article. There is a new vacation policy available for staff. In the content type on the right, instead of choosing posts or post content type, I'm going to choose link. And you'll see that this is now showing me a different setup. I can go here and select which link I want to add here. In this case, I want to link to our new vacation policy that we've just updated and made available to staff. So I'll click on link setup. I'm going to search for vacation policy, insert it, and then I can go ahead and add a little summary. Again, from here, I can now publish this new post, which is actually a link to our new vacation policy. In this case, I'm going to not add a thumbnail image, just to show you what that would look like if we go and add this to the newsfeed. Before I do though, just a few extra items I want to highlight here. Notice that when you are publishing a new news item, you are able to actually publish it right away or publish it at a future date. If it's something relating to a very specific event or an announcement that only needs to be made to staff at a specific date and time, you can choose to input that here. Another thing you can do is make an article or a post sticky. By clicking this sticky button, it's going to make sure that no matter how many articles are added to your newsfeed, this post is always going to keep sticky or keep showing up at the top of the newsfeed. You can set it up so that it always remains at the top, or you can say leave it sticky until maybe June 30th. So you can select a very specific date and time, at which point the sticky label is going to be removed. Another thing that we like to encourage when you set up news articles or posts that might be relevant only for a short amount of time is to think about setting an archive date from the get-go. So you can see here on the right-hand side, you have the option to set an archive date. In this case, I can say, okay, this news post is talking to people about a new vacation policy that goes into effect on January 1st. So come next year, I'm assuming that most people will have read this news article, will have checked out the new vacation policy, and this article is now no longer going to be relevant. Archiving content and making sure there's no outdated content on your internet is always a good practice. So whenever you can set a future archive date as you create the content, please do so. So in this case, I can click on Set Archive Date. I will move ahead into 2022. And I'll make sure that this article is archived on June 30th, 2022. Now I'm ready to publish my news post. You'll see here, even though I didn't add a thumbnail image, it is grabbing the main image from our HR announcements feed. So there's no gray box here that is showing an empty field. We'll also always have a nice image to associate with those news articles. And even though this post is just a link to another area on the internet, it still has a nice image. It has a summary, and it is made sticky here at the top of the feed, which we can see by this thumbnail image or this thumbnail icon. If I click on it, it brings me directly on that vacation policy page. Next up, we're going to take a look at news cards. How do you use news cards, which is different from news feeds on ThoughtFarmer? So we're going to start by taking a look at the different types of news cards that are available in ThoughtFarmer. The first one is our news carousel. For that, we'll just take a quick peek on our homepage. The news carousel card is the card that you see here at the top of the page. It can be featured on your homepage, but you can also add it on any page on the internet, whether that is just a section or a group page. The carousel card is really used to very visually highlight important news. There's two ways that you can set it up. So this news card can either highlight The carousel can either highlight items for a very specific news feed, for example, the latest posts in the HR announcements feed, or you can curate specific articles. Let's take a look how that works. I'm going to go here and edit my homepage, and then I'm going to go and set up cards. So from here we can see our news carousel. It's in use currently on the homepage. If I go and click on the gear icon, I'm going into the options. So you can see from here we now have a curated carousel card. This means that it's not showing just any type of feed on the internet and showing every post within it. I actually have curated very specific articles that go onto the homepage. In this case, for example, maybe I want to add the article welcoming Neil Armstrong to the company. We just created that in our HR announcements. So if there's a specific article that you want to add, you can just start typing it here in the add content. Welcome Neil Armstrong. It's adding it to the list of articles featured in my carousel, and I can even drag it to the top if I want it to be the very first news post that is shown. Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to update this, click on done, click on save, and we can see now that Welcome Neil Armstrong is our first featured article on the carousel. Just paginate through to all of the other feeds or all of the other articles in our carousel. The other option, of course, is an automatic carousel or an automatic news carousel card. And that's just the option here on the left. So if I click into automatic, what you're doing here is selecting a very specific news feed or multiple news feeds on the internet and adding content from there into the carousel. The benefit here is that if it's a news feed that has posts that always need to be shared with everyone, it's going to automatically update those articles in the carousel as long as new posts are added to that news feed. So maybe I want to add company news and HR announcements. Those are two specific content sources on the internet that I want to highlight in that carousel on the homepage. I can now say how many items I want to have show up in the carousel. The maximum can be 5, 4, 10, whatever you want. I'll click on update, click on done. And then we'll see that on our homepage carousel, it's going to show all of these posts from those two news feeds. That was our news carousel card, but we can see on the homepage that there's an additional news card here. It's a list view or a grid view that we can select for our normal or our other news card. So let's take a look at how that is set up. Again, I'm going to go in here and select my homepage editor and set up cards. Now we're going to take a look at this card, the news card underneath it. If I open this up, there's a lot of different options that you have in a regular news card. The display style is something that you want to take a look at. So again, for right now, the news on our homepage is showing in a list view rather than a grid view, and we are displaying thumbnail images. Again, as much as possible, use images with your news, and especially on your homepage. Visual images, those just add to the appeal of your internet homepage, and it makes it a lot more engaging for people to read that news and to interact with it. Once you've selected your display style, you can take a look at the order. So typically you'll have a number of different news feeds feed into your homepage. In this case, we have our company news, we have our PCU community blog, and we also have news from subscribe groups, which is something we're going to take a look at a little bit later. What we can do here is select, do we want all of those sources mixed up and have the newest items shown at the top of the news feed, which is something we can do this way. In that case, it's going to take a look at all three feeds here and send articles, the most recent articles from those sources to your homepage, but it's going to always put the latest item at the top, the most recent one. It's going to merge those news sources. You can then choose how many articles you want to have show up on the homepage. So default is 3, but you can, as you can see, you can make that as many as you like. You can also add additional news sources, of course, to this feed here. So what if I want to add my RSS feed? I'm going to grab a URL, and I can just add an external RSS feed, so it doesn't necessarily have to be an internal feed on the internet. I'm going to add the Thought Farmer blog here, and I can now update it to include those blog posts from the Thought Farmer website. I'm going to remove it for this specific example, and I'll just show you how merged news sources show up on your homepage. So I'll click on Save, and now you can see it says My News, and all the articles are coming from different news sources. The first two happen to be from the PCU community blog, and then there's one from company news. Of course, if we load more, it's always going to show up more news articles here. Let's take a look and see what that looks like if we do the opposite. I'm going to go into my news card again, and this time I will choose to order all of the items by source: company news, community blog, and my subscribe groups, and I can then select how many articles I want to have show up per news source. I'm going to leave it as is, 1, 1, and 2. Click on Update, and we'll just take a quick look to see what the difference in layout is. So in this case, I can still see my news, but I see a clear delineation in what news is coming from my company news feed, my community blog, and any groups that I have subscribed to. What is news from subscribe groups? Let's take a closer look at that. So news from subscribe groups is a way on your homepage to make sure that every member, every staff member receives news that is personalized to them, that is relevant to them, depending on the area of the company they work in, the team they're in, sometimes even the office location that they are located at. People will see news from the group pages that they are a member of on the internet. So on this fictitious one, we can see that I am a member of the sales team, right? I'm getting sales news on my homepage, and I happen to be a member of the Whistler office location. So let's see how you set that up. And we're going to go back to our human resources feed for that. Earlier, we set up our HR announcements and our human resources group. If we go back to our human resources group, we can see that there is a HR announcements feed associated with it. What I want to do now is add a news card to my main human resources group. And by doing that, I'm going to ensure that all 5 of my group members are going to see that human resources news on their homepage under the news from subscribe groups. So how do I do that? Again, I'm just going to go back and edit my content template here for this group and add a news card, just like we've seen on the homepage. You can see that there's currently in my page template, there's already a card here for news. It just hasn't been set up yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that by adding the HR announcement feed here. I'm adding it to my news card. And again, I have all of the options that I had previously that will let me choose what the display style should be for this particular newsfeed. In this case, let's go ahead and choose a grid just to mix it up a little bit. And again, if we have more than one newsfeed in this card on the HR team, we can choose whether we want it grouped by source or merged and have the most recent item at the top. We're going to click on done and save. And then now we can see that right on our group homepage, it's highlighting those news articles that are coming from the HR announcements feed. And this is the grid view that we talked about there earlier, which looks a little different from the news list view. So wanted to make sure that you have seen both. Now what's going to happen for everyone in this group, all of this news that's on their group homepage is also going to show up on their intranet homepage underneath the Newsroom subscribe groups. I'm going to go ahead and watch my homepage. And for me, because I'm a member of the HR team, I'm now seeing under Newsroom subscribe groups that those 2 new articles are showing up for me. And that again is something I achieved by setting up the news card on my HR group page. That is everything about news. We hope that has been helpful, and please do reach out to us if you have any questions about anything related to content and news on Thought Farmer.